property,
housing,
skills,
this is revolution, Stokvel for everything,
rural, blockchain,
crypto, women, wealth and wealth.
podcast,
this is heaven,
revolution, podcast.
we are coming for everything.
Greetings, Dumelang, Molweni. Welcome to another episode of the Stokvel Revolution podcast. Thank you so much for joining us once again to an exciting and educational Stokvel, everything about Stokvels basically. Today we have such a great topic, but before we get into it, remember to subscribe, like, and comment on Spotify, the Stokvel Revolutionary Podcast, and on YouTube, Finlight, and on TikTok at Finlight1. So today we are talking about something that is very topical within the Stokvel industry, doing property Stokvels right. And our guest is the amazing property queen, Silindile Leseyane, an award-winning property investor, property and Stokvel coach, co-founder and chairperson of Sakhisizwe Property Stokvel. Silindile, thank you so much for joining us today. Welcome to the Stokvel Revolutionary Podcast.
Thank you so much, Palesa, for inviting me.
It's so amazing. I've got so many questions for you, but at the same time, I had to pretend that I don't know you and somebody that really wants to know about property, Stokvel in general, and most importantly, how they work, because we all know, I know people are very curious in terms of how they work, even now that how popular that they are. But before we get too deep into it, I would like to ask you, what is your Stokvel story in that way? It's our theme question at the show where we're asking you, how did you encounter your personal encounter with Stokvels?
Yeah, my personal encounter with the Stokvel is the typical story of a black child growing in South Africa, in that I grew up in a family where, my mom, the aunts, the grannies, just generally the community was involved in some sort of way in a Stokvel. I know my mom, with her colleagues, they were shailani mali, where, you rotate money amongst each other. They had one way with her friends where they would buy each other luxury items. So instead of going to the shop and buying something on credit, you would be able to save up as a group, and then you go in, you say what it is, the item that you want, and then they help you to purchase that item. To the more traditional ones of around burial Lama society, we know that it was just about the money, but also in terms of just izandla, or the hands. If a family member was deceased, then that community would come and assist in one way or another. They had one way, they had groceries, so we knew Kuti come December, all the nice things would be like in supply. Meat, they would buy meat and share. So all of those typical Stokvels were the Stokvels that I grew up and around, and I really marveled at what they were able to achieve in terms of just helping the families achieve their financial objectives, whether that was, affording to buy groceries in bulk, or, saving towards an item, or whatever the case was. So with that kind of background, I always knew that, this is really something that is wonderful and has got the capacity to achieve a lot for the family, so we don't have to be indebted and all of those other things. So I thought, with the concept, having grown up in those kinds of Stokvels, right, there's so much power in collective goals, basically, right? So I thought, okay, having started out investing in property in my own, and then soon reaching a ceiling in that I couldn't access more bank financing because the bank was like, okay, you've already got this. So I thought, so how about if we actually came together and using the very same concept of Stokvels, but now and directing that towards property. So why property, right? So property, we all know, so in one way or another, we've been exposed to property. It's very simple to understand. Even a 10-year-old or a 5-year-old can tell you that a one-room house is cheaper than a mansion. You don't need a fancy spreadsheet to figure that out. So it's very simple to understand, and all of us understand that even having a back room provides income for the family. Also, having been in a family where my mom had a back room, so I saw, you know what, there's so much power in in property, right, in terms of back rooms. So now marrying the two of saying, how about we actually collect money, and this money is actually used to acquire an asset, right? And this asset we acquire once. And it becomes the gift that keeps giving. So in a way that we are able now to start earning an income from this asset. So instead of collecting money only to then spend and start over, we put money together, use it to acquire an asset, and that asset pays us. So we've still spent the money, but now instead of the money being gone forever, it keeps on repeating and earning us a passive income. So that was why I got attracted to property Stokvels.
Amazing. I like how you married the two, and how everybody has a Stokvel story, but how you use them is what differentiate every time I hear these stories. And you already touched on it, that your mom had back rooms, and that's where your property investor was born. So I want to ask you, Silindile, the property investor, or the property queen, as I like calling you. Tell us about that person besides the Stokvel side of it.
Okay, so having grown up, as I've said, in a family where we had a back room, I got exposed to property early on. I got exposed to the fact that, you have tenants in, and then they give you money, and that money is used to cover some of the household expenses, and, very nice, right? So I got, so that was my early introduction into that. So when I started working, I rented a place. I remember it was in Clinic in Pretoria, a 1-bedroom place. After a year, I did the maths. I thought, this is not working for me. I want my own house. I want to be able, I don't want to pay somebody else's bond. So I then bought a 2-bedroom unit. And this was now around 2007, 2008, when interest rates were rising much like they are now. So for those of you who have got that memory, you will remember, right? And so I found myself struggling to keep up with the increasing interest rates and the payments. So I thought, I've got a 2-bedroom, so why not rent the other room and I stay in the one, because I've got all the space that I'm not even using. So that was my first foray into property investing in my own right, in that I actually went and I put an ad on one of the portals, and I got applications. I had to screen them, their salaries, can they afford, and then I got a tenant who then got to live with me in that 2-bedroom unit. So that was my first real investment property in a way, which is a property I still have to date. And after that, I then started acquiring, in other properties, other investment properties. From that experience that I had gained, and I actually realized the benefits of investing in property. And since then, I've invested in various properties all over South Africa using different strategies. I've got single family homes, student accommodation, Airbnb, multi-let, so different kinds of properties that I invest in, as well as the investments with Sakhisizwe as well. So I've really dabbled in using various strategies over the years.
I love that you used different strategies, and you're gonna get more, at least a bit on it. But what I like is how relatable how you started, because people always think, oh my goodness, where do I start to invest in property? I don't have enough money. You are literally, for your own accommodations, decided that you're gonna get another tenant in. Thank you for that insight. Now, my favorite part, Sakhisizwe. Tell us about Sakhisizwe. How did you start, and how is it going?
So Sakhisizwe started from a problem that I had, or a challenge, as they like to say. In that, so when I initially started, this seed was planted of starting a property Stokvel. I then gathered some of my friends and I said, guys, let's start a property Stokvel. And we then did that, right? So we had a challenge in that we were a group of 10, which was a very small group, all very busy individuals, moms, business people, career, upwardly mobile, blah, 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 blah. And so the raising the money was not an issue for us per se, right? The challenge was, how do we then find the investment properties, and how do we manage them, and who actually does that for us, you understand? Because now we were all these equal shareholders in this business, and nobody was willing to do the work, so there was this expectation that I was the person, since it was my idea.
As always in all the stuff.
So you must do all the work, changing it. It's your idea, you do it. And I was willing to do it, but I said, but guys, you must pay me. And they were not willing to pay me. And so we then came a situation whereby we couldn't agree. They were not willing to do the work. They were not willing to compensate me. And so I was very frustrated. So I attended so in our constitution that we had with that particular Stokvel, we actually put down a requirement that each member of the Stokvel had to educate themselves in property. So either by reading a book and sharing their findings, in finding somebody who's in the property space and sharing the knowledge with us, attending networking events and sharing. So you had to do something, and within a year you had to do 2 of those events, 2 of those educational things, right, for the group, for the benefit of the group.
To put on your constitution.
So for the benefit of the group, if you didn't do that, you would pay a penalty. Tell you what, my Stokvel members chose to pay the penalty. Because they can afford it. Money is not a problem. And so I attended a networking event the other time, and there was a speaker who mentioned that, they've got property deals, they're looking for investors, la la la. And I thought, okay, you know what, Silindile? When I was having introspection, I actually thought, you know what? In life, there are 2 types of investors, and you need to understand that these are 2 very different kinds of people. There's an active investor. There's a person who says, I'm a property investor. I want to go out there. I want to find the opportunities. I'm happy to be in the Joburg CBD, scrambling through and finding this germ of a property. I'm happy to, every weekend, I'm pounding the streets looking for deals. I'm happy to be getting calls from tenants. I'm happy to be dealing with whatever it takes because I understand that I'm building a portfolio. So I'm an active involver. I'm rolling my sleeves up and I'm working. There's also a passive investor. There's one who's going to say, here's the money, do it. I don't want to know. I just want my return.
Most Stokvel members?
Most Stokvel members. Where we go wrong as Stokvels is that we assume that everybody's an active investor. Because when, as a person who's got that idea, you've done all, and you're so excited, oh my God, I can't find this
Then
property.
people are like, here's the money.
Here's the money, do it. And then you get frustrated when they don't want to pay you. Meanwhile, you did not make that very clear from the beginning, that when are you active or are you passive. So in order to avoid the frustration and the stress, understand your Stokvel members. Are they active investors or are they passive investors? And so therefore, when you do that, you clarify the roles and you know, okay, fine, nominate an executive whose role it's going to be to find
Very
the properties and to manage them and to report back to the members. And then the rest of you guys are passive investors and find a way to then compensate them and leave them to do their job.
Please, you're the most important thing. Leave them to do their job.
And this is how most companies run. Companies have got directors who are mandated by the shareholders, in this case, your passive investment members, who say, Palesa, we need a property that's going to give us a net cash flow of 2,000 Rand once all expenses are paid. So it becomes Palesa's job to go and find such a property and then report back to the members and say, I found such a property, la 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 la, are you guys happy? They give it the stamp of approval and off you go. Then you manage that investment on behalf of the shareholders. So what most Stokvels don't understand is those 2 different roles, so they get intermingled. So we're expecting 20 people to be actively running the company. It's not going to happen. So for me with Sakhisizwe, that was one of the first lessons that I learned in my stockfelling journey, is understand the profile of the investor. Not everybody wants to be actively involved and not everybody has to. Those who want to, by all means, let them. And that was the birth of Sakhisizwe. So because Sakhisizwe came through from that frustration where I said, okay guys, let us then just take the money that we've got and invest it. They still didn't want to do that. So that's when I then washed my hands off and guys, I'm out.
But you still knew that property stock.
No, very much so.
You just need the right people.
You just need the right people, right? So very much so. And now, guys, understand me very well. It was with that particular group, and it was when we're starting out, we've got these expectations, and my expectations were that we're all going to be equally
because we are
agreeing. And they were not about that life. They were about, you've got the money, you do it, it's your idea. And there's nothing wrong with that. And so that was the premise then of Sakhisizwe. It says, let me find the people who are willing, who want to invest in property. They're busy moms, they're professionals, the likes of Palesa, who's a member of the Stokvel. Yes. So they're very busy individuals who, they like passive money, they like money.
Definitely, Sakhisizwe, I'm a passive investor. But in others, I'm so active that I'm tired. So I totally understand that. What a great lesson, identifying the difference in your members, the active ones and the passive one, because that's really where a lot of leadership in these Stokvels get frustrated with. But I want you to, with all that you got into, with all those lessons that you got into Sakhisizwe about it, I want to tell us now the nice stuff, the numbers, the structure you are using, and the millions that you have invested?
Sure. Okay, so the journey with Sakhisizwe started in July. Like I was saying, with all the lessons learned, you always improve, with every offering that you put out there. So with Sakhisizwe, the idea was really to use the power of the numbers to access bigger opportunities that wouldn't be accessible to either of us individually. So we started the Stokvel in July of 2019, obviously with the understanding that this falls squarely on my shoulders to make sure that we find the right opportunities that are going to be providing good returns for the members. Those who want to be involved in whatever shape, form, or way, they can, but it's optional, right? So we went into that and then launched in July of 2019. And the Stokvel has done really well since then. I mean, we've won the SA Investor of the Year, for example, within the first year, which was, a recognition from the property industry that the way that we're investing in property is just, heads above shoulders amongst everybody else, right? So we were not just taking chances, we were really investing in property the right way. And not only within the property space, but also within the Stokvel space, we're one of the leading property Stokvels generally, not just property Stokvel, but a Stokvel, right? And I would say that all the time that we've been there, we've now raised close to 20 million rand, actually. We are now close to 20 million rand. In terms of the number of members that we've got about 300 members. And so Sakhisizwe is more than just a platform to learn about, or we just become passive investors. Like I said, those who do want to get involved, we do have member sessions where we do provide knowledge, information. As myself as a coach as well, I'm also providing coaching. And most of the people that I end up coaching are people that say, I like the way that we're investing in Sakhisizwe. How can I also get involved? I also want to start investing in property, because it creates that level of awareness that we don't just go and randomly go and buy any property off the street. It needs to make financial sense. We need to be clear, how are we going to make money from this property? Because now we've got investors that we need to answer to. So those things, when we're having challenges and we're reporting back to them and say, we bought a property, but now it needs to be rezoned. Okay, we are rezoning. Now the municipality is saying, you guys need to put a traffic circle before you get the zoning approval. So those kinds of things, the members are involved in that journey and they understand exactly.
Like things you wouldn't have learned
in any other way. So we're taking our members with us on that journey. So that is, that community, and that we're not just investing together, we are also learning together in terms of property, right? And so where we are now, we're also in a situation whereby we are also now starting to take advantage of like triple BEE opportunities to get into the commercial space, because now, the whole BEE thing, it's challenging because we want to be able to access opportunities that were not accessible to us before. Say, for example, I want to buy a mall. It wouldn't be possible for me as an individual with my 5,000 rand or my 10,000 rand. But once we become a collective, those kinds of opportunities become available, because BEE deals are still available. Triple BEE deals are still available. But the challenge is that there is no organized group that can take advantage of those opportunities. So when you need to now reach 2 million people or whatever, it just becomes a daunting task and an expensive task, especially for some of these BEE deals that need to happen a lot quicker. So that's why now we as a Sakhisizwe Property Stokvel are well positioned to start taking advantage of those kinds of opportunities, because we really are broad-based. We are a broad-based economic group, and therefore we can now come in and say we are going to own a stake in an office park, in a mall, or whatever the case might be, more in the commercial space and not just in the residential space where we've been previously playing.
So something that I'm sure you get this question all the time, but it also is very debatable, especially among Twitter. Because of the scams around property stockfelling and people understanding Stokvels at itself not being able to acquire an asset. Just in your opinion, what is the right way, in inverted commas, of investing in property as a Stokvel, whether it's through structures or anything like that? How can a Stokvel on itself be able to invest, the easiest way to invest in property?
So it really does depend on your strategy, because like I said, Stokvels are different. People assume that all Stokvels are exactly the same. They're all different, because even as individuals we're different, even as investors we're different. Our investor profiles are different, our investment strategies are different.
Types within types.
Types within types, you understand? So we could, for an example, decide that as a property Stokvel, we only want to invest in listed property shares. Which
is still a property
Which is
Stokvel.
still a property Stokvel. People think a property Stokvel is where we are putting money together and we buy for Palesa, we put money together, we buy for Silindile.
This is the one everybody thinks about property.
No, guys. That's not all property Stokvels are. It depends on what is it that you guys as a group agree is how you are going to invest in strategy in a property, in property, right? Much like how you'd attend a property networking event and you will not find any two single investors that agree on exactly everything, right? So for an example, if you decide that you want to invest in listed property shares, unit trust, ETFs, you don't even need to register a company or trust. You can just, as a Stokvel, enter into a contract to acquire those kinds of investments. It's possible, it's doable. You can also decide to invest in many other strategies that we won't have time to go into detail today. But as a pure Stokvel, as a pure Stokvel, you elect a representative, they can go and enter into a contractual agreements on behalf of the Stokvel, because the Stokvel is an entity on its own, right? So, but where it gets a bit tricky, it's where you want to acquire physical property. Unfortunately, in that instance, you cannot then do it as a Stokvel because it then gets tricky, because you can't have 10 people on a title deed. You can't have 10 people applying for a bond. It's just going to get messy. So that is when it gets a bit tricky, and where you need to get the right level of structuring and legal advice to make sure that everybody's rights are protected. So whether you're buying property for each other or you are putting money together so that you put down a deposit and the rest is then financed by the bank, or whatever your investment strategy is, it's very, very important that you seek the right advice so that you find a structure that's right for you. Because you may find one Stokvel that is comfortable to operate as a company. You may find one that's comfortable to operate as a trust. You may find another one that's comfortable to operate as a cooperative. You may find one that's looking at a combination of both, a company and a trust. So find the right level of advice for your unique situation so that you can be protected. So what would you want to be protected against? You want to be protected if somebody dies, one of your members dies. If 10 of you are in that Stokvel and you go and buy a property in each other's names, it means that when that person's estate card runs up, that property needs to be sold. So what happens if one of you die? You need to answer that question. What happens if some of you are married in community of property? The other one gets divorced. You need to answer that question. What happens if one of you gets into debt and their assets all needs to be attached, and the creditors realize that they've got an asset which is a property and it needs to be attached and sold to clear that person's debts? So how do you solve for that? How do you solve for tax? So all of those, because you want to make sure that the retrenchment, all of those things are so important. Exiting, so what is your exit strategy? So when you're looking at all of those things, you need to then look at bearing all of these moving variables together. What is the best structure for us? And no two Stokvels will be exactly the same, because they're going to have different answers for each of those. Yes.
I'm so glad that we really addressed that, and I hope our viewers or listeners really got that, because this thing of a Stokvel can't buy property is not true. Please, let's educate ourselves. What misconceptions and mistakes you have seen as a property coach, and how do you think a typical investor can fix those?
Okay, so the one is not getting the right level of education and knowledge.
Yeah, we preach education on this podcast, and people really don't take it seriously, but it affects everything.
It affects everything. It affects everything. Like I was telling you guys that when we started our first Stokvel, we put it into our constitution that we had to have
such
education.
A nice tip for all Stokvels. It doesn't even matter if you are a property Stokvel, whatever asset you're getting into, whatever Stokvel type you are in, it's very important to put some level of education on it. And I'll tell you the advantages also of having education in your Stokvels.
Absolutely, Palesa, and I think that can't be emphasized enough.
And you can't skip that step.
You can't, because the next thing you're just gonna go and buy any random property off the streets and you're gonna be in trouble, because like I'm saying, the structuring is the foundation, right? You need to make sure that it's the foundation. Everything is, you're building on a solid footing. So if you don't know anything about the things I've been mentioning now around trust, around companies and all of those things, then you're setting yourself up for failure. So I would say definitely the right level of education is important. You need to get educated. So find the right coach. Obviously myself being one of them.
One of the best.
One of the best. So get the right level of education, because that is going to pay for itself in multiple. So one of the ways that the Stokvels do this is through their joining fees. So that's what I encourage my Stokvel members to do, to say, guys, when you're setting up a Stokvel, just charge a training fee, and that training fee, use it as your kitty towards getting educated. Because when you're going to expect people to pay for it, they might be hesitant. But if it's already there and available, then you just use it then to either get a coach or get a mentor in, or invite a speaker to come and speak and educate you guys, or whatever the case might be. So definitely education is important. Secondly is having the right members or the right team around you, because sometimes we squander the most wonderful opportunities, and it really is just self-sabotage. It's because people don't understand, there's no clear role definition, and therefore delegation of duties.
Nobody's taking accountability. And then, a really wonderful thing ends up being squandered because of just unnecessary. I've got a lady who came to me and said to me, Palesa, they're a Stokvel, they've bought the student accommodation, and now they simply cannot agree on who's supposed to be managing it. Similar situation to what I was saying. So now she's decided she's going to pull out, so nothing is happening
because
now.
Everything was depending on her,
which is a lot. Because student accommodation requires a lot of active management, right? So she's just decided to let it go.
They couldn't even agree on getting an agent.
Nothing.
But yeah, I hear those.
So having the right people around you, having people with the right mindset around you, or else having those clearly defined roles. This is what. So those are some of the things, and also understanding the asset class that you are investing in is very important, which ties back to the education element. So if you're deciding that property is the one for you, understand what are the nitty-gritties around property. For you guys, it was franchising. Understand the nitty-gritty of the franchise market. Don't just think any old franchise will do. Understand each of them are different, their brands and whatever. So the investment in the knowledge is key. The investment in the people around you are key.
Seems to be very key when it comes to property investing, whether as a Stokvel or as an individual. But I want you to touch me on one misconception that you have heard where you thought, I don't even have time to answer that about property Stokvels.
For me, it's the one that says it will end in tears. The Twitter one. I just sit there and I roll my eyes. I'm like, what tears? Tears of joy. At least looks like this is a members. It's tears of joy. Because it is lack of knowledge. It's lack of understanding. It's when people get into things that they don't understand, and therefore they just paint the property Stokvels with the same brush. So I would say there definitely have been places where it has ended in tears, because people haven't understood what they were getting themselves into. They've entered into scams where you are promised, that you are going to buy a piece of land in Joburg for 50,000 rand. You understand? Or they promise you put 3,000 rand, 2 months later it's 7,000. Some of these things, guys, it doesn't take a genius to figure out what they are.
And people don't do due diligence, but again, that also how you learn to do that is through education.
You do you do your research, find out, are these realistic? Don't just get excited at the prospects and you start rubbing your hands. Does it exist? What is my protection? Who are the people that are behind this? It's not just like nameless people that nobody knows. Are they willing to put themselves out there, So doing that level of research will avoid the whole ending in tears situation.
That is such a good misconception there. But what would you say to non-believers of property Stokvels with what you have just said? You've already touched on it. People that just say, as you were saying, it will end in tears. Non-believers, do you think it's lack of education, or why do you think they think it wouldn't work?
I think people don't understand. I think we've already spoken about this. They don't understand that property Stokvels are different. For an example, we could start a property Stokvel where we are just holding each other accountable to save money, to put down a deposit. Or we want to buy our property cash in 5 years. It's still a property Stokvel. So people don't understand
the different types.
Some of them have got building Stokvels where they buy each other building materials. Others buy each other land and say, after we bought you the land, sort yourself out. So understand what it is that is involved before you just think that this is a scam or it will end in tears or whatever the case might be. Yeah.
So I really enjoyed our conversations, Silindile, as always. And most of the time, because I also work with Stokvels on a consultant basis. So every time when somebody's like property Stokvel, I'm like, hey, Silindile, and I go on to So I always refer people that want to do around that, but there's a lot of education around Stokvels and Stokvels, property Stokvels specifically, and people never understand that although this model has been around for so many years, but because it needs to adapt to what's happening currently as the year changes, there's so much educating opportunities, most importantly, especially more than just the leaders, the members. Educated members are so less problematic because they actually understand the risk of getting into opportunities or getting into business or getting into these agreements when you're trying to invest, whether it's property, franchises, that it might work or it might not work. But you won't know that if you haven't educated yourself, you don't put in the work. So what I want to ask you lastly is, as a leader of one of the most successful property Stokvels, what do you envision for the future to be like where Stokvels and property are concerned?
Sure, Palesa, I think you've touched on a lot of key points there around, the importance of making sure that people get educated, right? Especially the leaders around any kind of Stokvel, really. And that was why, I've even got a course that I put together that speaks specifically, to property Stokvels, because I believe it's so important. There is, a figure that's quoted that says that this is a 55 billion rand industry. 55 billion rand, of which is going to traditionally your funeral undertakers, underwriters, 90% of that figure, right? And then you look at the JSE for an example, right? This is the Johannesburg Stock Exchange. We've got less than a 3% shareholding in the listed shares as Black people. So you think if that 55 billion rand were to go into the JSE, what percentage of that would be?
We would increase it so much because we don't need. Yeah,
you understand.
So you're envisioning us taking part in the JSE.
Absolutely, and I don't see why not.
It's definitely possible, especially if we can raise 20 million within 2 years.
I understand. And this is me doing it as a side hustle. I'm side on side. I like the extra side. Amongst many side hustles that I've got. So if I was doing this full time, and if many people were to come and say, because at the moment where I am now, we find that if we've got an opportunity that is too big for Sakhisizwe, the other Stokvels that I've mentioned, we now collaborate with them. Do you get what I'm saying? So this is where we at now. So if we can, little Stokvels here and there, here's an opportunity to acquire Sandton City. We come together, we plug our money together, we go buy the thing.
Bigger.
Do you get what I'm saying?
It's bigger than us, and I definitely love that, especially where we are currently collaborating with Stokvels is very big, something that a lot of Stokvels didn't do back in the day. In my opinion, is one of the reasons why we don't have very wealthy Stokvelers out there. They were sleeping on collaborating. They were working in silos, but now with this thing of collaborating Stokvels and knowing, okay, Sakhisizwe can do 2 million. How much can you guys do? And how much can that one do? And then we get this. Then we're definitely coming for the JSE.
You get what I'm saying? And that's why we even started Women in Stokvels. So, and what we've also noticed is that, the Stokvels, if you guys think about it, right, in our communities, were mostly driven by women.
Yes.
And so they're the ones who were, because they've got children to take care of and whatever else and groceries to buy.
Yeah.
And so now the wave, you will notice that some of these leading Stokvels in the different industries are mostly pioneered by women.
Yes.
And so that's the next wave.
You know, the chairperson of thingy. I'm a chairperson of the People's Stokvels. Sakhisizwe is chaired by women. Silindile, I know of many other chairpersons where are women that are doing great things, especially today's Stokvels that are investing in opportunities.
And the nice thing is that we are not competing with each other. We are collaborating and we are leveraging off each other. For an example, Palesa, you being in the People's Stokvel as well as in the franchise Stokvel. If we, for example, get a retail space at Sakhisizwe, you guys can come in and open a franchise there. The People's Stokvel can fund that franchise.
Yeah.
Hello.
Yeah, I really hope that we're gonna get there. But definitely, what I've learned in this industry, we need people that are willing to get their hands dirty in the leadership, and we need people that will if you are not willing to get your hands dirty, at least be the supporter of the leadership that are willing to do that. In that way, we are working together. But as always, education behind everything. As much as this model is an old model, but the things that are involved now really require the leaders and the members to be well educated. Talking of women in Stokvels, this is not part of the questions. Why are we not doing something about women in Stokvels?
It's just that we've been busy, building our Stokvels and many other things as women, wearing many hats and all of that. But, it was a really interesting concept that myself, Palesa, and another lady who's in the farming Stokvel started, because it really is about, how can we collaborate and how can we get, access to more opportunities? How can we plug each other to opportunities when you see something is happening? And, so this is a space that we feel was where we could actually come together and say, how can we get more Stokvels, which are mostly women-led, thinking differently and moving away from the consumption Stokvels into investment Stokvels, which is the area that we are passionate about and where we play. So that was the thinking behind Women in Stokvels.
So I want to put a pressure on us. I want us to do something for Women's Day. And as Women in Stokvels. Ellen, I hope you'll be listening to this podcast. But I think it was a great thing, even if it's just one thing that you can do for women, because we know 80% of people in Stokvels are women. But Silindile, thank you very much for being here. But before I let you go, I would like you to share contact details of Sakhisizwe.
Okay, so Sakhisizwe, you can contact us on info@Sakhisizwe Property Stokvel.co.za. On Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, we are. And TikTok, we are Sakhisizwe Property Stokvel. So that's where you can get hold of us.
Of course, as Coach Silindile, how can you get your services?
You can go to my website, www.meetsilindile.com, or email me hello@meetsilindile.com. Hello with an HELLO @meetsilindile.com. That's how you can get hold of me.
Thank you so much. This was such a wonderful and an eye-opener, as always, when we're having these conversations, Silindile, and I hope our viewers and listeners have learned something out of this. Thank you for the revolution you are bringing into our industry as Stokvels, and I personally appreciate what you are doing for Stokvels, especially as women in Stokvels. See what I did there? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Palesa.
Thank you for joining us today. Remember, if you want to know more about Stokvels in general, I do have a book called Stokvels, How Can They Make Your Money Work For You? It is available in leading bookstores like your Exclusives and Bargain Books. Thank you.
Unbelievable.
Property.
Housing.
Skills.
This is revolution. Stokvel for every
Rural. Blockchain.
Crypto. Women, wealth, and well-being.
Podcast.
This is heaven. Revolution.
Podcast.
We are coming for everything.